Welcome back to Season Liberally. Today we are going to be making overnight focaccia, or a no-knead focaccia. It turns out amazing every time and it's super easy to make. Hope you stick around. Today we're going to make an overnight focaccia. I'm a big fan of making breads the previous day, the dough the previous day. Not only does it give it a chance to really develop the gluten that makes bread so wonderful, it also develops that yeast flavor that is, that makes bread taste rich and makes bread taste like it's really just made in a bakery or made in like a really high-end restaurant. It does require a little planning ahead of time. Admittedly, it requires you to put in the dough the day before. There are several ways that you can do this the day of. It requires more yeast and it's going to require more kneading time. So that's why I like to just sort of mix all the ingredients together, put them in my fridge overnight. Next day, it plops into a pan, proofs, and it's ready to go. It's a super easy recipe, so let's get started. What I have here is 2 pounds of all-purpose flour. Now you can do a little halvesies if you want, bread flour to regular all-purpose flour if you like to do that. I personally I think AP flour has a great mouthfeel to it, but if you like your bread a little more chewy, you can add a little bread flour to this. Just keep it at about 2 pounds. You want to keep it at 2 pounds. So to this, we're going to start mixing our dry ingredients. So we have 4 teaspoons of sugar. And we also have 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. Now, that's a lot of salt. The bread should be salty. Here's what I'm going to tell you though. I'm using diamond kosher salt. Different types of salt have different types of salinity levels, and they taste their level of saltiness changes. So diamond kosher salt, I use 2 tablespoons. If you're using Morton's kosher salt, that's gonna be too salty at 2 tablespoons. So the best part about this is that you can lower the salt content in your bread initially, and then with focaccia, you can add it after it's done. That's very traditional to add a little kosher salt to the top of the bread as it bakes. And then once it comes out, you can add a little more, and you won't have to just throw the loaf away, right? It won't taste so bland that you're just throwing it away. You've added salt afterwards. And then you could just note later on, oh, that wasn't enough salt. It's gonna take a little getting used to, but it works with 2 tablespoons of diamond kosher salt. So that's the kosher salt I'm using, and that's the measurement I'm using. So to that, I'm gonna add 4 teaspoons of active dry yeast, okay? That's going to be way more than a packet. I think this is 2 packets. I normally get mine in a little jar, so I don't know exactly how many packets that is. Just pay attention. It normally tells you exactly how many teaspoons or tablespoons you get out of one of those packets. Just read the back of it, it'll tell you. And then you'll need to have that many packets, but it's 4 teaspoons of yeast. Now, there's going to be people who say, don't add salt to yeast. It's going to inhibit the growth, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to want you to maybe put your yeast into hot water ahead of time. I don't ever really bother with that. These are holdovers from a long time ago when certain products would fail, like your yeast might fail, it might be dead. If you don't store yeast properly, yeah, sure, it's gonna die. But in this case, if you store everything properly, yeast lasts, this dry active yeast lasts forever almost. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I will just add this directly to the salt. But if you're worried, you can always stir this up, or you could add your yeast first, then your water, and then add in your salt afterwards. I just dump in all the ingredients at the same time. All right, now to that, I'm going to add my water. Now my water was poured out of the tap hot. It is now tepid. You want it to be about 100 degrees thereabouts. You want it to be warm to the touch. And so, because we're going to leave this on the counter for a few minutes before we put it in the fridge, and we want to try to make sure that it starts its active growth before we put it in the fridge overnight. Now I'm going to use a fork to mix this up, but you can use whatever you like. This is 28 ounces of water. And it's gonna be a loose dough. It's gonna be very loose. But that's what you want with overnight breads. You want a loose dough. And you want to get it nice and mixed. You want to be diligent about getting all this flour in here. Get it all mixed up. You want to clean the bowl off, okay? If it helps to use your hands, use your hands. I'm pulling everything I can off the side of the bowl here just to get it stirring. Now I use a fork because it's easier to get in here and spin it around. But if you like using a spatula, use a spatula. So there you go, sticky dough. You can see it's sticking to the side, right? So I'm going to scoop what I can off the side. I want to make sure that, because it's going to rise into this. It's going to rise into the sides of the bowl, so I want to get anything that's dry off the sides so it doesn't rise into it. There we go. Our dough's ready to go. I'm going to flatten it down a little. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take to the top of this, we're going to put olive oil all over the top. It's probably going to be about 2 to 3 tablespoons worth of olive oil you're going to use at this stage. You're just going to try to cover the top with olive oil. What that's going to do is overnight, that's going to absorb into the bread. Put a little bit of olive oil on top. Like I say, about 3 tablespoons. We're going to cover the surface of it. Okay, nice and covered. Now, we're going to take our press and seal. You can use whatever you want. If you want to use aluminum foil, use that. I like this press and seal. It gets a nice seal. You won't get any flavors, unknown flavors from your fridge that are accidentally in there. You won't get that. Now I'm using a big deep bowl. It's going to fill up to about here. Don't put this in too small a bowl because overnight it's going to overflow in your fridge, okay? So put it in a nice deep bowl so it can have its space to rise. We're going to put this on the side. I'm going to leave this outside on my counter for about an hour. And then I'm going to put it in the fridge and I'm not going to touch it till tomorrow. One thing you're also going to need for this is a sheet pan. Now this is not a cookie sheet. Cookie sheets don't have lips or sides on them. They're normally flat. Can't use a cookie sheet. You need a sheet pan. Now if you don't have a sheet pan, you can have the recipe and then just use a 13 by 9 because as you can see, this is about two of these makes one of these. This will not come all the way up to the top in your 13 by 9 pan. It's going to come up about halfway. So you can just use one of these, but be sure to have the recipe if you do that. If you want to make a nice big chunk of bread like I do all the time, and this stuff freezes great, so I normally cut it in half, put some in the freezer, and then I'll use the rest of it, and then later on grab it out of the freezer and just pull it out. It really freezes very well. And then I just have fresh bread whenever I want it. So this focaccia, you're going to want to use something like this in order to do this full recipe. So now we're just going to wait until tomorrow to bake this bread off. Okay, so it's been 24 hours and I'm going to take the top off so you can see what this is supposed to look like. Do you see how most of this oil has been absorbed? That's what it should look like. Okay, so now this is going to have to go through a proofing process. It already rose once. Now it needs to proof in the pan before we bake it. So we're going to turn this out into the pan. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add about 2 tablespoons worth of olive oil. Now there's a lot of olive oil in this bread. It's not a health food, but it definitely needs this olive oil. It needs the olive oil to soak into the dough itself, and then it also needs the olive oil on top and underneath to cook properly. So what we're going to put 2 tablespoons of olive oil on this beautiful pan here that's well carboned, and we're going to just work it in, and then we're going to turn the dough out into it. We're just going to work it around with our hands. You don't need gloves for this, just use your hands is fine. Make sure your hands are clean. If you have gloves, that's fine too. So here we go. We worked a nice amount of oil. Every surface in here has been covered with that oil, okay? And I'm going to use my hands to turn this out. So here we go. All right. turned out dough. Now, I'm just gonna try to stretch it if I can, push it, pull it, get it so it's covering as much of this surface as possible, okay? It might sort of stretch itself out and then not be fully in position and sort of pull itself back in. That's okay. As it rises, it's gonna fill the pan. You just wanna make sure that it's kind of level. You wanna level it off, tap it down. It's okay. They call this punching the dough, right? It's gonna get more rise after this, and that's okay. So now we gotta cover this. One of the difficult things about putting in a shallow side pan is we gotta make sure that the top, what we cover it with, doesn't stick to it. Now, if you cook this in a 13 by 9, you have this recipe and you do it in a 13 by 9, you're gonna be okay. Because those sides of those pans are pretty tall. Chances are you won't puff up enough to touch what you cover it with. Now in this case, we probably will. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a couple of sheets of this aluminum foil and I'm gonna pour just a touch of oil on it and then rub it in there. And if I do that, what's gonna happen is it's gonna make it non-stick essentially, right? And that's what I wanna do. I wanna make sure that this whole thing is covered where it's gonna be touching and it's covered with this oil. And that way, when it rises, chances are that it won't stick. Now, it might stick a little, and that's okay too. This bread is rustic looking, so it'll have that rustic looking feel to it. Be dimpled on top. So we don't have to worry too much if it sticks to it. But since I oiled it pretty generously, it shouldn't stick, okay? I'm gonna do the same thing over here, just a little bit of oil. I can see that it's only on one side here that I need the oil, so I'm not gonna oil up the whole thing. Just put oil on this side and then drop it on top like so. Now, as you can see, it's sort of tented a little bit, and that's good. I wanna try to keep it off of it if I can, but if it touches, it won't seize to it and be hard like glue to pull off of there. We're gonna let this sit for an hour and a half, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna put it in the oven. Now, at about a half an hour before this is ready to go in, so about an hour from now, I'm gonna turn my oven up to 400 degrees convection, 425 still oven, okay? And so that way, in a half an hour, it'll be up to speed, up to the proper temperature that it needs to be up to in order to cook the bread, and we don't have to wait for it. So about an hour from now, I'll turn my oven on, and then half an hour later, I'll take the top off and finish the bread before it goes into the oven. Okay, it's been about an hour and a half, and we have to get our topping ready for our focaccia. Now, focaccia can be topped with all different kinds of things. It can be topped with olives if you like. You can press it directly into the top. You can cut cherry tomatoes in half and stuff those in there. All different kinds. You can put cheese if you like on top. You can put cheese in there. But I'm gonna do a very traditional one today. I'm gonna cut up some rosemary. So now this is about 2 sprigs worth of rosemary. There are half sprigs here, so I'm gonna cut this up. Now I'm cutting this so that like when someone bites into this, they won't get a giant chunk of rosemary. They're gonna get a nice little hint of rosemary, which is what we want. We don't want people to, I've seen people garnish this with just the leaves of the rosemary, just full leaves, and let me tell you something, there's nothing worse than getting an herb, a concentrated herb flavor that you're not expecting. And when you eat focaccia, you expect this flavor to be somewhat subtle. This is about a teaspoon worth of rosemary, which is going to be plenty for the top. So what we have here is our bread. Now our bread has been proofing for an hour and a half, and we are going to slowly pull off. You see how it's starting to stick? But I did oil these up, right? So you can see it's sticking, but it's coming off, which is what we want to see, okay? So now, how do we prepare this? What we do is we take our hands like so. So you're trying to make like little cat paws, essentially, when you do your indent. You're going to indent as you work your way across, and we're going to press to the edge. We're going to press this whole piece all the way to the edge as far as we can, and we're going to dimple it. This gives the top of the bread that dimpled look, and it catches that olive oil in there, in those dimples, okay? So to that, we're gonna sprinkle on our rosemary. Now you can, if you like, put a little more oil on top. I have some oil that's leaking up from the bottom, so I clearly think there's enough oil on here. I don't need to add any more. If you think you do need to add a little, you can go ahead and sprinkle a little oil on there. I'm gonna put some flaky kosher salt on top. Should be a little salt on top here. Now this is gonna go in a 425 still oven, 400 degree convection oven for 25 to 30 minutes. Just watch it, and then you'll see it start to brown. When it's nice and brown, we're gonna take it out. We'll say hello to our focaccia. Look at how nice that looks. Really nice. Got a golden top. We are gonna take it off of this so it doesn't sit, because there might be a little bit of oil. We're gonna make sure it's not stuck at all. I'm using an offset spatula to just pull it up and slide it directly off. All right, we're gonna let it sit for a little while and come back, cut into it, see how it tastes. All right, our focaccia has been sitting for a few minutes. We're gonna pull it off its rack, cut some, and give it a shot. Listen to that sound. I'm gonna show you the bottom of this. Look at the bottom of that. Look at how nice that looks. All right, let's give it a shot. Oh, it's perfect every time. Great flavor. Not too much salt when I use the diamond kosher salt instead of other salts, so it doesn't come off as salty. A little salt crystal on top adds to it. That really deep flavor that you get with rosemary. Outstanding. I can't tell you how much I love this recipe. All right, hope you make it. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you come back. I hope you subscribe. I hope you like. I hope you share. Catch you next time. Season liberally.